My name's Alice from Leaf, and I'll be chairing today. And we're here this morning to really hone in and focus on carbon and talk about carbon. But then isn't everyone at the moment. But what you'll hear from us today is a bit about what we're actually doing, what some of the leaf farmers are actually doing, and what difference is that making to the environment, to their farm economics, and to what people think of them. So that's the real focus of today. For us at Leaf, nothing happens in isolation, and everything is all part of an integrated farm management approach to the farm business. So what we're going to unpick a little bit today is, if we focus on carbon over here, what impact does that have over here? It's not just about it's not just about trees, it's not just about soil, it's about everything and the integrated approach that has. So specifically today, we're going to be hearing a bit about the work and the real meat underway in two key Leaf projects. So we can hear a little bit about the projects, but then what we're really here for is to hear from the farmers that are involved in those and to see what they're doing on the ground and what difference that's making. We've got quite a range. Really excited to bring a range of speakers for you here today, and we're going to tailor this around the three aspects: your footprint, your finances, and your farm image. So there'll be sort of key slots for questions after the speakers, three sort of key slots for questions. So if you can put your questions in the chat as we go through at any time, that would be great, and then we'll pick them out and answer them at those sort of key sessions, if that's all right. So firstly, the first project we're sort of pulling from and pulling out for you today is called Resilient and Ready. And this is a program that's a partnership between Leaf, our pals at Corteva Agriscience, which I know there's a few of them in the virtual room today, 4 farms and a range of experts. It's a 3-year program working on each individual farm, looking to catalyse change, to build confidence, and to work collaboratively to really catapult those farms to be more resilient and absolutely ready for the future of farming in this brave new world that we're entering. So to do this, what that actually looks like is working with a range of on-farm experts, some Corteva-led trials looking at what's required in this new sort of phase, and also a wide range of training, which more of it has been online than we anticipated, but all the better for it. And also looking at Leaf tools and how these can be used in the best way possible to really short circuit this change. So I like to see it as Leaf zoomed in. It's the fantastic work that we've been doing for 30 years with a huge range of people. And if you really focus in on that with 4 farms, what does that look like? And then at the end of that program, they hopefully, if they haven't got too annoyed with me, will become Leaf demonstration farms and continue that fantastic work and the wider legacy and share what they've learned from that with more and more farms. So you'll be pleased to hear we're going to hear from 2 of those fantastic farmers today, one in Berkshire and one all the way up in Aberdeenshire, and hear a bit about the fantastic work they've been doing so far. We're also going to be hearing from one of the experts we work with, Andy Guy, who I'm sure many of you know. And the great news is that we've got competition today with a great prize, which is the best question asked today to anyone wins half a day's advisory service from Andy Guy. So a bit of that as well. So that's a little bit about Resilient and Ready. And the other project we're going to talk a little bit about is called Agri-Capture. And I'm going to pass over to my colleague Becky, who's going to introduce you to that. Becky.
Thanks, Alice. Are you okay to share your screen, please? Just got a few slides. It wouldn't be an online event if we didn't have technical difficulties, which we have had this morning at the Leaf office. So Alice is sharing them for me. Okay, so Agri-Capture CO2, it's a Horizon 2020 funded project, and it's duration of 3 years. So it's the way it started off in January, and the way I kind of sort of see it in my mind and explain it is there's kind of 2 streams to the project. The first sort of side of things is looking at promoting and supporting the implementation of regenerative practices. such as those practices that our speaker has implemented on his farm, Duncan Farrington. He's one of our leaf demonstration farmers and also a project partner and one of the case studies for the project, so a bit of a celebrity. Then the other side of the project is looking at quantifying the potential of carbon, of soil as a carbon sink. So if you could skip to the next slide, Alice. Thanks. So the Agri-Capture service would, sort of the platform itself will offer the 4 services, as I'm explained here: the explore, support, validate and quantify. And over the 3 years, it's hoping to develop a methodology that will be approved, of a Verra approved, to deliver those carbon credits. And then if you want to skip to the next slide. And it's going to achieve this by using the tech people, which quite honestly isn't me, but from what I understand, they use historical data from different farms across Europe to develop the algorithms and then sort of teach the system. And then they use a combination of satellite imagery, earth observation data and on-farm soil samples, and they bring them together to develop the platform and the kind of to estimate the potential carbon sequestration that can be achieved on your farm, which in turn will develop the carbon credits that you're able to sell. I think that's kind of it for the project itself. Leaf are involved in a bit more of the engagement side of things, so we'll be holding more events. We've got a leaf surgery on the 7th of May, looking at kind of launching the project and explaining it in a bit more detail and taking questions. And then going forward in the next 3 years, we'll also have a few more sort of workshops and training events through the Regenerative Agricultural Network across Europe. Yeah, you can move on to the fab. That's Agri-Capture CO2.
Great, thanks, Becky. And yeah, that's a project right at the start, so really exciting to see where that goes. So yes, as I say, those are the projects that are the sort of focus, I guess, of some of this work that we're looking at with carbon. But very much the source of it, of course, comes from what's happening on farm. So with that in mind, we've themed that around the 3 conversations: your footprint, your finances, and your farm image. So to kick off with your footprint, what we're looking at here is what impact are you as a farm business having on the world? And there's sort of 2 parts to that: the looking at emissions and what's going out, and also the sequestration, which is obviously a really exciting opportunity for farming as well, in terms of what can you pull in. So to hear a bit about what that really means, we're going to hear from 2 farmers, and then take questions to them and also to Becky. And so if you've got any on what you're hearing and the projects involved, then please do pop them in the chat. So the first person I'm going to hand over to is who's going to talk about this is Nick Down. Nick Down is the farm manager at Yattenden Estates in Berkshire. So Nick is a resilient and ready farmer, and we've been working with him for the last year, and carbon is just one area of focus for this. But over to you, Nick.
Nick, well, good morning. Thanks very much, Alice. Yeah, I'm the farm manager for Yattenden Estates down in Berkshire. We're quite a big, diverse estate with lots going on. About 2,000 hectares of arable cropping, which I manage, and I'm going to talk about further. But we also have a big area of woodland on the farm, plus a Christmas tree growing business, supplying anywhere up to about 80,000 Christmas trees per year. And we also have a small herd of British white cattle. So our cropping is reasonably high input cropping, a lot of milling wheat and milling oats and feed barley, so crops that generally require higher levels of inputs. Our break crops have evolved a little bit over the last few years, now that we're not growing oilseed rape at the moment, so our break crops made up of pulses, linseed, maize, and also now under countryside stewardship some more areas of legume and herb-rich grass, and also temporary grass. We started looking at our carbon footprint and particularly our emissions probably 3 years ago now. We've evolved how we've done that over the last 12 months and started to delve a little bit deeper into specific areas. So the first tool we use is the farm carbon calculator. a farmer developed tool which gives an overview or a snapshot of the whole farm enterprise. So for me specifically here, the arable farming business and also the livestock part of the business. So we sort of look at the wheel on the left hand side, and we can already see where our main issues lie, or where the highest levels of our emissions come from. So the green area, 44%, is in the crops growing themselves. The blue area on the left hand side, sort of 30, just under 35%, is the inputs we put into our crops. And then the other sort of big area that we can influence is our fuels, the dark blue area at the top, accounting for just over 13%. Obviously, one of the areas that we make day-to-day decisions on is the actual inputs into the crops themselves. And here we see, as we break that down, a large proportion of that is into the fertilizer inputs. As I said at the start, growing milling wheat, milling oats, generally a higher level end of the inputs in terms of fertilizer going into those crops to sort of build protein for the end product. So that sort of gives one area that we can focus on going forward. So now we've learnt this information, we start to delve a little bit deeper, and we look at sort of comparing year by year specifically into certain crops. So this table shows what we've done on our milling wheat crops over the last 2 years, two very different growing years. 2019, a kind year, much higher output, and then 2020 harvest year. If we remember back to the autumn of 2019, it started raining at the end of September and never really stopped until the tail end of March. So a different set of crops we were managing going forward or going through that year. So we really here, we almost have a sort of a low input and a low output year in 2020, and 2019 was a high output and a high input year. So we can compare the sort of almost the two systems against each other and how they look in terms of emissions per hectare, and then also per kilogram of ton. So to hone in on sort of specific crops, we use the Cool Farm tool developed by the industry, more sort of product, more based on the product itself. So the table we can sort of pick out here on the left hand in the 2019 column. If we look right down at the bottom, we can see the emissions per tonne, about 350 kilograms of CO2 into per tonne of product. A much better year in 2019, so higher yields. Then we compare with 2020, slightly more emissions per tonne, really driven by the inputs we've used, and then the less output in the end. So it sort of starts to demonstrate how efficiently we use our inputs towards the end product. So this sort of gives us much more detailed approach in how we can look at our individual crops and our own individual, our own levels of inputs. Once we've got that sort of information, we can start to compare with, or we start to benchmark ourselves against some other farms with similar levels of cropping. So we see the two green bars in the middle of that chart. Number 3 was the 2019 harvest year, and number 4 was the 2020 harvest year. So we can see, we sort of sit in the middle of the range. We're not the best, but we're not the worst either. But it also shows where we can aspire to get to with those lower levels of emissions in crops. If we look at bar number 1 and bar number 5, it gives us a target to start working towards, but sort of shows us that we're not a million miles away in what we're actually achieving. So just moving finally to the other side of what we look at, the sequestration of carbon. Bearing in mind, I'm only looking at the arable farming business and not including the woodland or the Christmas trees. So we can see here, the blue part of the ring is the soil that's held in, or the carbon that's held in our soil organic matter and in our soils itself, with big areas of spring crops. We're growing a lot of cover crops over winter. So we're sort of using, you know, the autumn and the winter to build our organic matter levels by keeping our ground covered the whole year. So that's one area we can really focus on going forward. Obviously, that's the one we're all waiting for as farmers is a you know, a soil organic or a soil carbon code that we've seen elsewhere in the world, that will give us some, you know, hopefully, you know, give us a lot more information to work with going forward. The other areas that obviously that we have on the farm, we have some field margins and we have some hedgerows, but you know, the vast majority of our carbon stock is held in our soils. So I think the key things that we've learned and the ones we're looking to work at, obviously, is our fertilizer inputs and how we can manage that going forward, how we can reduce our levels of inputs, or how we can use our inputs more wisely against our outputs, so we can, you know, hone in more on variable applications of nitrogen or different sources of nitrogen in our business. And also on the flip side, we need to learn more about how we can absorb and store more carbon in our soils. Alex, back to you.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Nick. I think, yeah, really interesting. You know, I asked Nick a little bit to talk about the sort of tools he used, and we hear a lot about different tools for different things and that sort of thing. So I think that really interesting for me, using having a general look and then honing in more detail to really help inform what you do, but also some challenges thrown out there in terms of having a general standard as well. So thanks very much for that intro, Nick, and got some questions coming in, which is great. We're going to take them after we've heard from Duncan Farrington as well. Duncan Farrington is a long-standing leaf demonstration farmer, and he's also a leaf mark grower. So as I say, we've been working with Nick for the last year, with Duncan for considerably longer. Duncan farms in Northamptonshire and has built the very successful Mellow Yellow cold-pressed oilseed rape brand. And carbon's been an area of focus for Duncan for a really long time. And more recently, he's got involved with as a partner in the Agri-Capture project that Becky introduced us to earlier. So I'm going to ask Duncan to briefly explain a little bit more about himself and the farm and the brand. And then we're going to transport you, albeit virtually, via video to see a little bit more about what Duncan's been doing on the carbon side of things. But Duncan, if I can just ask you to introduce yourself first, please.
Alice, thank you very much for that introduction. So yes, so I've been a leaf demonstration farmer for many years and been involved in leaf and sustainable farming ever since I came back to the family farm in the mid-90s. So it's something I've always done and been interested in. And way back in 1998, we stopped ploughing, and I was intrigued by carbon at that stage, although I didn't know where it would lead to and what it necessarily meant. But we put in place sort of more sustainable or integrated farm management or regenerative farming, but sustainable farming techniques. And I think the video is going to talk a little bit about that. And I've learned an awful lot over the years. And then last year in 2020, we put all of our leaf mark data we've collected on energy efficiency together to make something of it for the Mellow Yellow brand to see whether we could achieve carbon neutrality. And there's lots of tools out there. Nick's mentioned two of them, and they're all very good tools. But we went down the certified route, and I chose to work with the United Nations, and we became certified by the UN. But the astounding bit at the moment is that the UN and other bodies, there is no Kyoto-approved methodology of measuring soils carbon sequestration, and that's where the Agri-Capture project comes in. So at the moment, please, everyone, start looking at your carbon, do what Nick's doing, because it's all going to help us build up a picture. And then if the Agri-Capture project becomes a great success over the next 3 years, by the end of it, we will have an internationally accepted, verified and approved Kyoto method of measuring soil carbon. And eventually, you know, the agricultural industry may have something to trade, which is another string to our bow. And I know not in this audience, but I have spoken in the past to farmers, and some people say, well, in that case, we don't want to do anything now, because let's wait until we get paid for it, because if we start from a low point, we're going to get income then for improving it. And you've already done it, Duncan, so you're not going to get any income. Well, that may or may not be the case, but certainly Agri-Capture's hoping to backdate payments for 3 to 5 years. So whichever tool you end up doing, start on the journey now, learn the mistakes, learn from it and improve it. And if nothing else, we have a moral obligation to be doing it anyway, because we know we're on this knife edge of climate catastrophe. But I think it's not doom and gloom. It's all exciting, and mankind does have the wherewithal to make a difference. So with that, Alice, let's go to the video and see what that says.
Let's. Great. Okay.
Farrington Oils are signatories of the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative. We have also achieved the carbon neutral gold standard, where we have looked at all the energy data on the farm, accounted for the energy produced by the solar panels, taken into account our employees' commute to work, as well as all the transport involved for everything that leaves the farm. This gave us a net carbon emission of 340 tonnes, which we have offset through reforestation and green energy initiatives. However, the United Nations doesn't recognise our carbon soil sequestration at the moment, but I hope in time that will be accounted for. Through small changes, we have made big differences in our carbon emissions. For example, by reducing the intensity of our cultivations, I've reduced the fuel use by between 60 and 75%. By broadening the crop rotation, I have reduced the nitrogen use on the farm by about 13%. By installing solar panels on our barns, we are now generating up to half of our own electricity, and even embracing simple things like LED lights. It all makes a difference. Also, being part of a sustainably conscious company is proving to be infectious amongst our small workforce. 2 people now choose to cycle to work regularly. 1 person has started growing fruit and vegetables in her garden, whilst another is doing energy monitoring on the whole of their home. So there really is an appetite for doing the right thing. The biggest gain has been in soil health from the sustainable techniques I have been practicing, with this field being our testbed over the last 18 years. Although not recognised yet by the United Nations as counting towards our carbon neutrality, I have shown through ongoing soil analysis how this field's general soil health has improved, including soil organic matter, which has increased 75%. The net result has been the absorption of an extra estimated 300 tonnes of carbon dioxide by this field every year. To put this into context, our randomly parked mellow yellow mini car produces around 117 grams of CO2 for every kilometre driven. Therefore, on this field alone, we are absorbing enough CO2 to offset the emissions from around 200 of these cars from UK roads per year. If you add in all the other fields on our farm, the trees and the hedges and the wildflower areas we've created, the energy from the solar panels, the energy we used in running the business of fertiliser and fuels and electricity, for example, the total CO2 emissions from our business is enough to offset the equivalent of around 2,400 mini cars off UK roads every year. So sustainable agricultural soil management has a huge potential influence on climate change. However, I feel we're just on the start of this journey and there's a lot more we can do. Chemical fertilisers and pesticides have enabled the world population to grow from around 1.5 billion to 7.5 billion in a little over 100 years. However, society is now asking questions about these practices and the tools we're using. Fertiliser manufacturers are looking at technology to make them more efficient for the plant and less polluting for the environment, something I will be trialling on our farm. I am also looking at reducing total nitrogen fertiliser use further. Last year on this field, for example, with the increase in soil nutrition, I was able to reduce the nitrogen use by 20% on a crop of spring barley, still gaining a respectable yield and excellent malting quality. This year, I am trying to take this further by establishing a clover ley under our wheat crop. keeping it there for the next 2 or 3 crops and dramatically reducing the need for nitrogen fertiliser. It has so far been a complete disaster, but I will learn from this and we will try again in the spring under sowing in a barley crop.
Great. Well, thanks, Duncan, for that, for the intro and for the video, and I think gives you an idea of the breadth and opportunity as Duncan introduced there in terms of what can be done. And also, I always think good to hear about the disasters as well as the successes. So thanks very much for sharing those with us as well, Duncan. Great. Okay, so we've now got time for a few questions to Duncan and Nick, and also to Becky. So I've got loads, but Claire was going to monitor the chat for me. So Claire, have you got any questions, and I can ping pong them out?
I do, thank you. So we've got a first one for Nick, actually, from George Fisher. How do you feel about being held accountable for emissions from fertiliser production within the Cool Farm tool? So I suppose that's a question of accountability, is it? Who is accountable? The farmer, the manufacturer, etc.?
I think it's something we obviously factor into our operation. Where we're not using it, it wouldn't be manufactured. So even though it is a byproduct, so yes, it forms part of our calculations. I think it goes back to the wider picture of just how we use that input more efficiently. What can we do as farmers on the ground to use it more responsibly, and ultimately where we can use less. So that's something that we can influence, and we're definitely looking at here is how we can reduce and how we can use more wisely, to demonstrate that we are to demonstrate as part of the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. One here from Ian Edward Brown. So some people see natural capital quite like Bitcoin, which, as we all heard in the news last week, particularly revealed that it has an awful carbon footprint. So would farmers do well to own the natural capital space, of which carbon is the foundation?
Great question. Duncan, do you fancy taking that one on?
Oh, thank you, Alice.
Talk to us about Bitcoin. You're welcome.
Yeah, my knowledge of Bitcoin is very low, but yeah, natural capital, it's something I think we've all got to grasp. And farmers, whether tenants or landowners, we are the ones that can have an effect on it. But I think it is good that we should be paid by public to look after providing public goods. And also, we should also be paid by the natural capital. Now, that can be combined in both private and public sector money, but I'm struggling here because it's a very in-depth topic we could spend a long time on, but I think we've got to think morally as well. Just because we've got something good, we should be discouraged from destroying it to then get paid to make it better again. The natural capital should have a value that is somehow achieved economically so that we maintain it and improve it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's yes, you don't want to get into a sort of I think I know what you mean in terms of the ethical aspect of it and maintaining it in that way, but also potentially harking back to what you said before, Duncan, about being proactive and owning the space. I think that's only going to happen if people are getting on and doing it and doing it for the right reasons as well. So aptly answered. Thank you, Duncan. Claire.
Thank you very much. This one is for Nick again, specifically, your popular Nick. This is from David Hoyles. How do you allocate your sequestration and renewable energy to each arable crop? By area grown of each crop, by tonnes produced of each crop, by turnover, by something else?
So I try and keep it reasonably simple. So we just calculate it as per hectare, or as a percentage of the area that we crop. My focus really has been more on emissions and where we can cut our emissions. I guess that there's so much we still need to learn around sequestration, particularly around our soils, which I think is something that's going to evolve quickly. As we've been alluding to, talking about sort of carbon trading, that's something we need to learn a lot more about. But from my point of view, I've tried to keep things as simple as I possibly can, and really treat, as sequestration, treat it as a whole farm approach. So, literally we just average it across our area for each crop.
I think that's an area we've struggled with a lot at Leaf as well, both looking at energy usage and carbon footprint. And in the absence of, I think what we'd always say is if you're starting it to do what makes most sense to you, so what's most useful to you in terms of when you're comparing things year on year, because that's really what we're looking at, that trend. But appreciate also the need for some clarity on that going forward more broadly. Claire.
So we have one from Mark Tufnell here. I don't know if we have the answer to this, but what is the best method for calculating soil organic matter? How can variances across different methods be understood? How can we come up with an industry standard?
Big questions all there. Duncan's keen. Over to you, Duncan.
Yeah, this comes up every time, and loss on ignition and various different laboratories and all these different things. I'm not the researcher or the scientist. All I would say on this, as amongst farmers, we do discuss it a lot. Don't worry about it. Pick a laboratory, pick a test, and use the same one year in and year out. And you'll find with carbon, don't take 1 year in isolation, because it does go up and it does go down, and it does depend on what depth you take it from and what time of the year and what rainfall we've had and all those other different things. And I've got the data for the last, since 2002, and it does go up and down, but it's the general trend you're looking at. And I was talking to one researcher where they looked at, they sent the same soil off to lots of different laboratories, and all the results came back different, but they did it for several years. This was a research station. They did it for several years in a row. And although the results were different every year, each laboratory had the same trend. So don't be put off by which one, build up the trend. And from that, and this is where then Agri-Capture will come in, because they're going to combine, as Becky said, Earth data and satellite imagery with ground truth in tests on the ground. And where at the moment I walk in a W pattern on my field and I randomly dig it, and I try and make sure I dig it the same sort of depth. It's going to be very much more objective on the where and how it's going to be tested. But don't let the discussions between the different laboratory results be an excuse not to do it.
Great, thanks, Duncan. Becky, did you have anything you wanted to add from the Agri-Capture point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of echo what Duncan said around the consistency, and it's all about the trend. You're looking for that positive trend rather than the actual figures. I think from not so much from the agriculture point of view, but more from just sort of an industry point of view, I think that I think it was the second question, how do we get that standard within an industry? And I guess from Leaf's point of view, it's collaboration. At the end of the day, there's so many conversations going on. There's so many bits of research and thoughts about what is the right thing and which way we should be going, but they all seem to be happening in isolation sometimes, and everyone wants to push forward with theirs, and it's about bringing it all together and having a conversation around what's realistic and what is sensible but detailed enough, and getting that balance right. Something that Leaf tries to do, involve ourselves in quite a few conversations. For example, we're joining a sort of a working group around harmonization of metrics, sustainability of farms, and soil testing is one of those areas that we want to look into, and hopefully pull leaders in the industry together and have that conversation and say, look, people are getting frustrated, there's too many options out there, but to sort of reinforce what Duncan said, don't let it bog you down, don't let it pull you down and get stuck into that sort of confusion. Just pick one that that works for you, whatever it is, and stick with it. Have that consistency, and the same it goes for quite a few tests like carbon footprinting. Pick a tool that works for you with the data that you've got on hand, and the results that are useful for you, and stick with it. You're looking for that trend, you're looking at rather than the specific figures.
Cool, thank you very much, Becky. Nick, do you have anything to add? Any wildly different thoughts? Do you disagree or agree? Any favourites?
No, I think, from my point of view, is trying to keep things as simple as what we possibly can, and just build up an evidence base in the background, and similar to what Duncan's doing. Really, we're doing nothing more complex than that. It's trying to keep it simple, so we just got, as things evolve, we have the data in the background to be able to feed into whatever system comes forward.
I think it is a complex area, and through the Resilient and Ready programme, Nick, I know you've been working with Ian at Sustainable Soil Management, sort of trying to understand some of those measurements on farm, because this is something we're looking at on the 4 farms over the 3 years. What changes, what trends are we looking at, and again, we made the decision to go with that and work with Ian, and just so we can look at the trends. So I think that's a good point. Claire, any more questions?
Yes, to dovetail into that really nicely, actually, and probably one for you, Nick, because you did talk about this in your little talk. What is the ease of use of the farm carbon calculator versus the Cool Farm tool in terms of scope and depth, and perhaps an indication of how long each takes to do, or a comparison?
It's not easy, and it's collecting the data in the background, which takes time, and the more accurate you can account for, particularly around your inputs, the more accurate reading you will get out at the end, and more you can sort of scrutinize what you do. But I think the key part of the process is being able to collect the data and allocate it to each specific area. And I won't lie, it does take an awful lot of time to draw that together. It means going back and sort of scrolling through invoices and crop records to have that data to hand. I think either of the systems are very, very similar. So, certainly what we found is once you've gone through that data collection exercise, you can pretty much transfer it across definitely the 2 or 3 platforms that we've looked at quite easily. So then you can start to look at slightly different areas with the same data. Yes, it does take lots of time, and the more accurate you can keep your records, the more accurate picture you will get at the end of the process. It's a bit of a winter job. It takes a little bit of time to do, but the more you put into it, the more you get out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. We have got lots more excellent questions coming in, but I'm actually going to finish off that conversation there, if that's all right, because we have some more fab speakers to share with you, and they may well come up in those conversations. And if they don't, then we have them on, so we'll make sure we direct them and get an answer back to you as best we can. But a really big thank you to Nick, Duncan, and Becky. I think a great look at the sort of the breadth and depth of different ideas that we can talk about in terms of reducing emissions and increasing sequestration, and then also through the questions, some really detailed look at some of the tools and some of the methods in soil organic matter, and I think we never profess to have all the answers, but hopefully through some of those conversations we can start to build up a better understanding. So big thank you to Nick, Duncan, and Becky. So that sort of concludes the your footprint side of things. We're now going to look at your finances. So we've heard and seen a bit of the impact that closer attention to detail can start to have on the environment and what's going on there with soil organic matter and that sort of side of things. But next, we're going to look at what impact this analysis is having to individual businesses. So what's the change in success, the change in bottom line, and the change in finances. So try and unpick some of those. So again, we're going to hear from 2 speakers, and then we'll have time for questions after that. So again, very welcome to put questions in as we go along, and we'll take them after we've heard from both. So first, I'm going to hand over to Andy Guy, who's a farm business consultant who has helped a great many businesses with many things, including many of them becoming LEAF Mark certified over the years. He was also the first approved LEAF advisor consultant. And I've asked him to talk a little bit about what benefits he sees from businesses who go through this process and look at energy and carbon and really everything in that much more detail. So Andy, if I can pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. I ought to introduce myself, I guess, a little bit, a bit of my history to give me some sort of, hopefully some credibility. I came from a non-farming background, and I got my first farm, a county council farm, in the mid-1990s. And that's where I first encountered LEAF. in those days, Leaf was quite a young organisation and was growing very, very fast. But it had an interesting tool available, the Leaf Sustainable Farming Review, and that attracted me. It helped me manage my farm much more tightly. Our farm business grew, and in the middle of the foot and mouth crisis in the early 2000s, we moved into a bigger unit. And I farmed there as a dairy farmer until 2010. In 2010, I took a different direction, and I started doing this consultancy work, specializing in sustainable food and farming. And these days, I offer a sustainable food and farming advisory service to farmers, well, throughout the UK, but actually beyond as well. I've worked in Jersey, Germany, Czech Republic, to name a few. I think it's important to think about what sustainable farming actually is. It's a phrase that's bandied about quite a lot. And there are three important strands to sustainable farming, or sustainable anything. It has to be environmentally sustainable. That's the one that we all think of first of all, and that's where carbon accounting comes into it. But it also has to be socially and commercially acceptable and sustainable. And it's important to remember that. It's all very well doing a lot of environmental work, but if it's not going to pay and put money on the bottom line, then it's not something that farmers are going to be able to continue to do. So the good news about carbon accounting, we've talked a lot about carbon accounting. The good news about carbon accounting is that if you can measure your carbon and you can measure your energy consumption and measure your fertilizer use, you can manage those things and manage them in the right direction, manage them down. And the real bonus from all of this is that most of the things that contribute to your carbon footprint are costs to your business as well. So if you can improve the efficiency of your fertilizer consumption, you can improve the efficiency of your energy use, that's going to directly turn into a figure on the bottom line in your business. As we've heard from the other farmers, certainly most arable farms, the lion's share of your carbon footprinting is coming from energy, whether that's electricity or fuel, in some cases gas, and alternatively fertilizer. Those are the two big users. So they're the easy places to start your journey in reducing your emissions. I like to talk about optimizing the use of your energy and your fertilizer. And I think that's an important way to look at it. This is not about eliminating energy consumption or eliminating fertilizer use. It's about using it in the right place and using it as efficiently as you possibly can. Sometimes that's about reducing it. Sometimes it's about targeting better. Sometimes it's about increasing yields without increasing inputs. And all of those things will have a positive impact on your footprint. So how does reducing carbon emissions contribute towards your sustainability? With those three strands in mind, reducing your emissions clearly improves your performance with regard to greenhouse gas production and global warming. That's the environmental benefit. That contribution that you can make is equally a social benefit to the community that you're living in and the rest of our population. And by reducing your costs in doing so, it's going to be helping your commercial position as well. There's been some interesting discussions about the pros and cons of the various tools, and the message has come through. I think Duncan said it first, but I want to reiterate it. The different carbon accounting tools do come up with different answers. And I think that the really crucial thing for a farm is to find one that suits them and stick with it and look for those trends that Duncan talked about. I did a little bit of a survey just for fun last week on Twitter, and the farm carbon calculator came out as the most popular one amongst most farmers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. So look at the variety. And I think Claire, who's going to be speaking in a moment, has got some experience of one of the other ones as well. So there's a lot to be said for shopping around. The NFU and Minette Batters have said, declared that UK agriculture needs to be carbon neutral by 2040. That's 10 years ahead of the government's ambitions. And if we're going to do it, we've got to get cracking. It's going to be a combination of things that will help us achieve that. Some of it will be simply reducing our energy consumption and our reliance on fossil fuel sources of energy. Some of it will be through sequestration, which we've talked about a little bit today, and about changing management of hedgerows and woodland and things like that, particularly soils. But I think that the message I want to give is whatever we do, we have to make a start. And now is the right moment to do that, I think. So, Alice, I'm happy to pass the controls back to you.
Great, thanks very much, Andy, and really good, yeah, useful to get that kind of context and overview, and just remind us a little bit what we're looking at here and why. I think that point about suiting, using a tool that suits you is a really good one, and also useful for you. What we're always keen for at Leaf is monitoring and measurement and analysis for use rather than just for the sake of it, which is certainly what the Leaf Sustainable Farming Review has been about, and as much as possible what these tools should be about, rather than a process to go through and not do anything with. So that brings me perfectly on to Claire Grant, who is another one of our brilliant, resilient and ready farmers. So we've been working with Claire and her husband Craig for the last year, and they've also been working with Andy exactly on some of this issue and analysing things in a bit more detail. So Claire runs a mixed and very busy business up in Aberdeenshire. They've got a huge amount of eggs. I'd tell you how many, but you wouldn't believe me. I'm sure she will. They've also got pigs, cattle and arable. And they really started looking at this analysis in the last year. Firstly, through that efficiency, energy consumption and attention to detail side of things. So really coming at it from a business perspective. So I've asked Claire to talk a little bit about how she's been looking at this in more detail, how that's helped them, and the opportunities for savings through this. So over to you, Claire. You're just on mute, Claire.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Alice. Yes, myself and my husband Craig run a mixed farming unit up in Aberdeenshire in the northeast of Scotland. Craig did hope to be here today, but unfortunately hens and spring work has taken over. So we have 200 hectares, 148,000 laying hens, which is made up of 52,000 free range and 96,000 enriched colony. We have 200 bull and heifers and 2,000 pigs, which we take from weaned through to finish. And to do all this, we are lucky enough to have a fantastic team of 6 full-time guys, 2 of which are agricultural apprentices and 5 part-time guys and girls. So we are just at the outset of looking into our carbon emissions. It was a daunting process to get started and knowing what tools to use. However, the Leaf Resilient and Ready programme has highlighted the importance of monitoring and recording data and always thinking about evidence of consideration. And Leaf has given us the push that we needed to get started initially. So Craig and the guys have been recording the diesel consumption in the tractors and machinery for specific jobs. Just in the middle of last year, they got started with that. And off of the back of the findings, Craig has changed out his tractor tyres to 900 flexible low profiles, which are very flexible for sowing and various field work. The results out of this was that less diesel has obviously been consumed and lower emissions. Trailer tyres has also been changed to super singles for main road work and using low profiles for field work. And after conducting trials on the trailer tyres, it was found that the low profiles in the road was equivalent to pulling an extra 2.5 tonnes, which quite surprised us all. So now on the pig and poultry side of our business, customers are now starting to ask questions around carbon emissions. So it was time we started thinking about what we're going to do. Here's a picture from Friday night, Craig changing out the tyres. So I thought it was quite a good comparison just to see the normal tyres here and his new Vista tyres that he's put on. So me and my boys was out just having a look at him on Friday night and giving a wee help with that. Slide. So as a result of an article written last year about our involvement with LEAF in the Resilient and Ready programme, we were approached by a company called Eggbase to trial a carbon footprinting module they were adding to their existing service platform for egg producers. Eggbase is a platform where we're able to input all our production and recording information for all our flocks. And we're able to keep all our audit documentation within the system as well, monitor grading results and benchmark against breed standards. And the system provides us with a whole life history for all our flocks. And so this is an example of one of the graphs that we can view for each of our flocks, showing the flock egg production, egg weights and mortality, and all against breed standard. So here you can see the green lines is our actual egg production, and the blue lines here is the breed standard. So for this particular flock, Lomond Classic birds, they've been fantastic layers. And then if we just compare one of our other flocks, with the breed of the birds was H&Ns, and you can see that our actual production has just been below the breed standard. So there's a few different factors that has allowed for these results, which I can maybe speak about later, but it's a good comparison, and for each of our 7 flocks, we're able to view this data as well as more specific information as well. So far it's been a fantastic tool for us to use specifically for recording were egg production data. Last year we doubled our bird numbers from 72,000 to 148,000 birds, and in doing this we obviously required to improve our methods of recording all our flock information. So so far we're enjoying using it and looking into what else it can do for us. So Eggbase is specific to egg production, therefore it's not a whole farm approach, but we have to start somewhere. It looks at analysis of individual feed rations, uses a Tier 2 methodology and follows greenhouse gas protocol and IPPC emission factors. And the boundary of carbon footprint, the boundary of carbon footprint is our range, and the carbon report that we can produce from it produces a kilogram per CO2 value per egg or per bird. Our poultry feed diets are going to be where the bulk of our emissions come from, and due to the soya content in our diets. With soya coming from South America, the carbon footprint is huge. Each of the bars in this graph represents all the diets that we feed to our birds in the past year. We feed all our birds a split feeding method, which means they have 2 different diets to satisfy their nutrient requirements at different times of the day. So our morning feed contains more protein in the form of soya, energy and soluble calcium to give the bird more strength in the morning and replenish all her nutrients used through the night to put the shell in her egg, plus give her the energy to actually push out an egg. Afternoon feed is a lighter diet, and because the graph is anonymized, it's quite hard for you to fully grasp what it's showing. So to explain, the bars in the graph show that our morning diets produce significantly more emissions, which are these ones at the top, than the afternoon diets. But due to the 40% morning and 60% afternoon split, we are improving our overall feed efficiency. Using our split feeding method, we've already seen benefits over the years of improved shell quality, feed efficiency and lower feed costs, as well as a longer lifespan of our flocks, which has a significant cost saving in itself. Our average flock lifespan was previously 72 weeks old, but now we can see them through to an average of 80 weeks old, which is a 10% improvement on the livability of our birds. For us, this means a 10% less new point of lay pullet purchase, and in real terms, one less flock rear for every 10 years of our each 7 flocks. This equates to a pullet cost saving of £60,000 per year for our business. Although our main aim of split feeding was to improve production performance, we can now see through this feed emissions comparison that our emissions are lower than if we had been feeding our birds a conventional diet. So the next steps for us, to lower our feed emissions further, we're looking into alternative sources of protein. This year, through the Resilient and Ready programme, we're trialling growing 10 acres of spring beans to hopefully use in our birds' diets as a replacement for soya. Craig got the spring beans sown at the weekend, so it's now a waiting game to see how they grow and harvest in the northeast of Scotland. So it could be a success, but it could equally be a disaster. We'll wait and see. We're currently striving to increase the acres or tonnes of homegrown cereals to improve efficiencies and better utilise more of our own farmyard manure, as we currently sell a few thousand tonnes a year. And the debate is now on at the moment between welfare and the environment. For example, free-range birds are perceived to be better for the welfare, but enriched colony, we believe, are more environmentally friendly and carbon efficient than free-range. We're interested to see if our carbon reports show this once we have full flocks data through Eggbase. We're now looking into other carbon auditing tools for the other areas of our business, so any recommendations would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. Yeah, just bringing out so many fantastic points there in terms of, you know, that real focus on efficiency, that you know, the best thing you can do for your carbon footprint is to really hone in on that efficiency and look at what carbon you're producing per egg and that kind of thing. And really interesting to see some of the analysis that you've done on that. Also looking at specific business, which, you know, specific part of the business, which isn't always easy. And I know we've had some questions about fruit side of things as well, which I don't have the answer to at the moment, but we'll make sure we get one at some point today or later on. Also wanted to say, yeah, also you're interesting, your focus on some of the hard hitters. You know, you've really identified the areas that you can make some big and significant improvements on, mentioned feed and diesel and that sort of thing. And also just to mention, Claire mentioned about Eggbase contacting her as a result of Resilient and Ready, and just to say we're really keen for that on that particular project. We've set up the farms, you know, almost as a platform to go forward with. So if there's any other organisations that want to work with us on that, or want to work with the farmers that you've heard from today, then please do get in touch with me. My contact details will be there at the end. But yeah, so big thanks to Claire and to Andy. Again, I see lots of questions coming through. Claire, can you hit us up?
Yes, absolutely. And please keep your questions coming. So one from Crawford Conry to Claire. Do you have an easy way of recording diesel usage? What do you do at the moment?
Currently, at the moment, it's a very simple process. Last year, we got a new diesel tank installed, which does have a proper meter on it. So Craig simply put a notebook tied onto the diesel tank, and every time a machine is filled, the amount of diesel that goes in it is written down, and against it goes the job that the machine's away to do. So how we now take that forward, we haven't quite got to that part, but Andy Guy is assisting us with that at the moment. So some of these things it's very simple processes, but it's just knowing what to do and where to go with it.
You mentioned as well, Claire, at one point, quite interesting dynamic set up amongst the guys and girls that work for you, looking at the, not necessarily competitive, but getting them involved, being a really key part of it and understanding why you're doing it and that sort of thing.
Definitely.
Alice, can I add something?
You can.
I'm a big fan of keeping systems very simple and easy to operate, and equally, it's important that they match the farm and the characters you've got on it. So I've got other clients, lots of clients like Claire are using just a notebook and jotting things down, and they're transferring that maybe into a spreadsheet or something from time to time. Equally good though, I've got a client in Kent who has set up a WhatsApp group, or actually multiple WhatsApp groups amongst his staff and some of the consultants and advisors and people like that he uses. So he has a WhatsApp group where his staff simply type in the amount of fuel that they've used or filled up with and the task that they're going to do with it. And so that comes into a central point, really easy to collect that way. There's another client I've got who's a bit more techie, and they've got shared Google Docs system where they're updating spreadsheets directly into into the farm computer. So there's lots of ways of doing it. It's all about finding the one that suits you best and allows you to be more accurate, because that's the key. When we talk about measuring energy or measuring fuel, a lot of farms say, yes, I do it because I've got a quarterly bill for my electricity, or I've got invoices for my diesel, and I know I've bought 20,000 litres of diesel this summer. But actually, that's not accurate enough to really help you drill down into where this is going. And I love Claire's example of the trailer tyres making such a big difference. It isn't until you actually drill down into which machine used how much diesel that you can start to find these things and change them. So it's all about getting really down into the nitty-gritty to get the full benefit, I think.
Thanks, Andy. And yeah, like you say, what's right for you, but also a good range of ideas you've given there that hopefully will follow through. And also just to flag up that Leaf have an energy efficiency spreadsheet, which is available on the Leaf Sustainable Farming Review, which is broader than just diesel, but is energy that helps with energy collection data. Claire, another question.
Thank you, Alice. Yes, and this one is from Jenny. We heard during Online Farm Sunday yesterday. Great plug, thank you, Jenny. If you didn't all get a chance to see that yesterday, you can go back and watch again some amazing stories of farms around the country. We heard yesterday about the potentially negative environmental impacts of soya production. Could you foresee a point where hens are fed a completely soya-free diet?
I think I would need to ask our feed specialist that question, but personally, I don't think it's specifically the soya, it's actually where it comes from. So we get, on average, 29 tonnes of soya delivered to the farm each week, but that soya is coming from South America. So it's where it's actually coming from that's the issue. We really wanted to trial growing soya ourselves, but in reality, in the northeast of Scotland, it wasn't going to happen. We do know that there's some farmers down in England that grow it, so maybe if there's any more of you down there with more tropical climates than us, that would obviously be better. If it was only hauling it up from the south of England and South America, that would have a huge impact. But equally, if the spring beans work in our diet the same way that the soya is, then it may be a case that we can try and source some more beans within the UK rather than importing a protein source from out with the UK.
Thanks, Claire. Yes, Claire and Craig put that gauntlet down for Corteva to help us grow soya up in the north of Aberdeenshire, which I haven't quite answered yet, but doing lots of other exciting trials. And you mentioned about the other feed sources and stuff like that, Claire, which I think if you're looking at percentages will start to have an impact. Claire, any more questions?
Yes, we've got one more from Robert Price. Not sure if this works for you all, but we have a system that simply reduces, simply reduces human error. Each machine has a tag where you can tap on the tank meter and send information back to the office, and you can produce graphs. So I think that's more of a bit of helpful information actually there, but we will share that publicly after this, and we will also, as Ali said, answer any more questions that you might have. One here from Andrew Brown. With trailer tyres, has anything been done to calculate the carbon footprint of the manufacturing and transporting of new tyres around the world? We might not have an answer to this right now, but it's a really good point, again, in terms of you've got to consider, as we do in integrated farm management, that making one choice might have an impact or consequences on other choices. So I don't know, is there anybody on the panel that wants to tackle answering kind of the cost benefit analysis of new tyres versus carrying on using the ones you've got?
Yeah, I think interesting. Duncan was talking about the sort of scopes of carbon footprint and what happens on farm versus off farm, and we were talking about that with nitrogen the other day, Duncan. I don't know if you want to pick up on that a little bit more.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Yeah, there's what we've been talking about today, where the different farm carbon measuring models out there. That's very much looking at what's called scope 1 and 2, which is what you actually do on your site. So in my case, it's the fuel I use on the farm, on a tractor, or the electricity, or in Claire's case, you know, it's the electricity and the heating maybe in her chicken sheds, and Nick again with the fuel and the fertilizer. And I know one of the questions about the fertilizer was, how does Nick feel about accounting for the manufacturing? Well, that comes into the scope 3. So whether it's the transportation of new tyres around the world, or the production of fertilizer off-site, or the transportation of soya from South America to Aberdeenshire, that all has to be taken into account in our carbon footprint. And whilst we may not directly be able to affect it on our farm, it does come down to the choices that we make on where and how we source these products. So whether it, you know, with new tyres, yes, that will be, if you're doing a certified carbon measurement like we've done, that will have to be taken into account. So very much then that changes the dynamic completely on how you look at measuring your things. So very quickly, fertilizer alone, a lot of the footprint is in the manufacture and distribution of it. So you might actually look at using less fertilizer with a nitrate inhibitor to make it more efficient. You might look at, in our case, we've just this week planted, or last week planted, clover under the spring barley to try and reduce fertilizer use completely over the next 3 or 4 years. Other farms that have AD plants might use that as a source. Claire's already selling her chicken muck to neighbours who might use that as a source. And then if we start talking about rhizobia and compost teas and all the other things, there's so many different sources of just nitrogen alone that as technology moves on and experience moves on, we will look at those things, which will be, they're the scope 3 measurements that will have to be taken into account.
Great, thanks, Duncan. Yeah, I think that different use of nitrogen, and also I think the manufacturers are starting to look at that, realizing that might become a point of difference for people when they're choosing what they use. And we're through the Resilient and Ready project also going to be looking to trial the use of Optonite as an inhibitor as well, to look at the interplay of some of these areas. Andy, did you want to mention something on that front?
Thank you, Alice. I wanted to go back to the tyre question that Andrew Brown asked, and just observe really that what Claire has done with her tyres, or what Craig was doing with his tyres, is not throwing away or burning the old tyre. They're using the most appropriate tyre for the most appropriate job. So they're now running 2 sets of tyres on their trailers, and they switch depending on the task that they're doing. The super singles would be doing a lot of damage to the soil if they used them at harvest time in the field. So they're using a flotation tyre for that job. But the flotation tyre is very costly in fuel when it's just going to run up and down the road. So the suggestion that Andrew was making about just sticking with the tyre you've got might be right in certain circumstances, but in Claire and Craig's situation, it's right to have 2 sets because they have 2 very distinct tasks that they use the machines for.
Thank you, Andy, for explaining that better.
Yeah, and longevity of all of those things being extended. Brilliant. I'm going to finish that session there. Again, I can see more questions we will endeavour to answer afterwards. And a really big thank you to Claire and Andy, who I think really brought to life what some of those things, and some of them look relatively simple, and then some of the efficiency data work that Claire's collecting are much more complex. But yeah, really sort of brought to life some of the key issues that we're looking at, and also the breadth of carbon. We're looking today through the lens of carbon and carbon footprinting, but actually, as soon as you get through that lens, it's really broad in terms of the things that actually people are doing on farm. So the last session that we're going to touch on is looking at your farm image. So Duncan talked about it. We've all talked about it, that we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. But it's also important that people know about it and see that farms are taking a lead in this area. So I'm just going to pull, we haven't got any more people coming out of the hat for you, but just going to pull on some of our speakers that we've heard from who to talk a little bit about this sort of angle. So starting with you, Duncan, that we talked a little bit about the carbon neutral status, and you work with the certification of that. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more detail about why that's important to your brand, maybe more particularly the mellow yellow side of things, and what you think, how you're trying to change the way people think about you.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. So yes, we have got a brand, and whether it's a mellow yellow or I'll keep thinking of Claire's eggs, they are the same. So people go into shops and they make choices, and we obviously sell through national retailers, and I've dealt with them for a long time. And at the buyer level, at the director level of a retailer, they've been talking about sustainability and carbon for a long, long time. But then when you got down to the buyer level, actually they just wanted something at the right price. And they paid lip service to the sustainability provenance, but that has genuinely changed in the last few years. And now right down at buyer level, who are young people that are rewarded for getting volume and sales growth, they are now very much being pushed to have the provenance. So when we first got the certification, I've got a bottle of oil here, and we put this little neck collar on the bottle, which gave a very simple message about how we were the world's first food brand to be carbon, plastic and leaf mark. And when we put it on, our sales started, that was this time last year, our actual sales started increasing hugely overnight. And we got I got quite worried. We'd overcooked it a bit. Well, actually, it turned out it is nothing to do with our provenance. It is to do with lockdown and people stockpiling. But after a rather strange year with coronavirus, people are going to get back to normal habits. And I am absolutely convinced that whether it's retailers or the consumers buying in the retailers, and it's the generation, the Greta's generation, that they're going to be let out again soon. And we've had 12 months to sort of try and get our house in order, and they're going to be asking more and more questions, and they're going to be the consumers of the future. And I'm just absolutely passionately convinced we've all got to be asking ourselves hard questions, and it's not just a threat, it's a great opportunity. So what Claire's doing with her carbon auditing and your eggs, and Claire will no doubt say the same, the fact that the egg carbon calculating people came to you is that they can see the potential as well. So as farmers, at the end of the day, we're all producing foods, and we just want to produce foods with the right provenance, and people will buy into it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Duncan. Yeah, great. Just snapshot of what that means and what that looks like. Claire, can I ask you Duncan set you up there a bit, but in terms of introducing it, but would you you briefly touched on that you've got a wide range of customers for your eggs, and that they were starting to ask questions about carbon. I was just wondering what part that played in some of your decision making, and where the business goes, and how that feeds into your decision making, and how important you think that side of things is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all know that these conversations have been happening for quite a number of years, but especially now it's coming more to the forefront. And we have a packer that retails our eggs through the supermarkets for us, and we do have our own brand of eggs as well that is specifically only in Tesco's. It's an Aberdeenshire Choice egg box, so you won't see it down in the south of England, but we know through our packer that these questions are now being asked. So we know that it's coming, and we just think we might as well get started with it. And it is difficult to get going, but I think that if we start now, come another year, we'll have a set of data to work with, and we'll be able to improve on it. And we do have, last year, just in the middle of lockdown, we put up a little hut at the end of our road. So we're selling farm gate eggs as well. And I think it's great to, when we stop to stock up and everything, it's great to talk to people, and the public do want to know where their food is coming from, and they'll be starting to ask these questions as well. So I think that we're best just to get going with it, because we're all going to have to end up doing it in a couple of years anyway. So
great, thanks, Claire. And I think that proactive approach has come through really strongly from both you and Duncan there. And also good to hear that's important for your relationships with your big suppliers in your supermarkets, but also with the local community as well. And I know that's a big area of focus for you guys as well. Becky, are you still with us? And are you having? She is, yes, brilliant. Becky, I know certification is part of Agri-Capture and what you're looking to develop there and some of the uniformity and aspects. And I was just wondering if you could talk a bit more about that and why you think that's important.
Yeah, sure. So the verification side of Agri-Capture is looking to develop the verified carbon units through lots of verified carbon standard. So it's the VERA process, and it's looking to define the methodology, develop the methodology, and then eventually it's sort of externally audited the methodology to make sure that it's robust and credible. And I think it's something that, as Duncan mentioned earlier, soil carbon sequestration is the one that it isn't verified currently, and there's a huge potential. You know, is it the 5 trillion hectares of hope? You know, soil. We've got this massive potential here, and agriculture as an industry has this, you know, brilliantly unique opportunity to act as a source and a sink. And I kind of feel like it's sorry, we've got lots of stuff going on in the office. I don't know whether you can hear the background noise. As of Duncan and Claire has alluded to, it's that I think often forgotten aspect of integrated farm management, the community engagement and the social engagement side of things. People want to know what's being done out there and how it's being done, and if you can link that with your brand and link that with your products and show that you're not only, you know, providing a brilliant service by producing food and providing food, which everyone in theory hopefully has the option to choose 3 times a day, but they're also going above and beyond that and working towards mitigating this climate crisis. I think it's a brilliant opportunity for brands and producers.
Cool. Thank you very much, Becky. And I think, yeah, another perspective there on why carbon's important and, you know, getting ahead of the game. And a lot of people are caring and asking now, and even more people are going to be caring and asking about it in the future. Claire, I think we had a question come in on that space.
Yeah, we do. And this is a really important question, actually. It's from Tilly Jarvis. How can we balance selling the carbon sequestered on farms and offsetting your own emissions? Should farms be net zero before selling surplus carbon?
Good question. I'm seeing lots of panelists nodding. Becky and Duncan. Duncan, do you want to kick off on that? And then I'll come over to you, Becky, if that's all right.
Yeah, okay, so absolutely. So at the moment, we had this emission of 340 tonnes, and that's simply because the soil is not yet recognised. So the first target is through the Agri-Capture project to get the trusted methodology so we can actually use our soil in our calculation. Then use that so we get neutral, and then if there's any left, you can trade it. Now, not every farm is going to be able to do this, and not every soil type. I'm just lucky that my clay soil is good at absorbing carbon. It won't be able to absorb it forever, and I am aware that there'll be some growers that it's just might be about not losing any carbon. But yeah, certainly get neutral before you start trying to sell it. It's like having the interest in the bank account. Pay off your debts before you start borrowing the money elsewhere, sort of argument.
Great, thanks, Duncan. And Becky, thoughts on that?
I would just completely agree with what Duncan said. Yes, I think it's about net zero yourself as a business, and, you know, hopefully developing that methodology that allows your soil to contribute to that figure, and then, like you said, whatever you've got left over, that surplus as such, you can then use that to start selling as the verified carbon units, as either if businesses want to offset or potentially inset their emissions.
Great, thanks, Becky. And I think that is absolutely critical. You know, we've got carbon neutral status for agriculture by 2040. And we've got the massive opportunity of selling carbon, but not to confuse the two. That, you know, we can't necessarily, you know, we've got to do one before we do the other, and that can happen on individual farms, you know, but also on a as an industry level, we want to maintain those targets before we get too carried away. Duncan, did you want to add to that? got your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, I have seen questions today about make sure we keep the money on farm, and is this money all, when we start selling, is it all going to go to city people? And I think that is a very important question. And again, Agri-Capture is about having a trusted, verified, certifiable method. There are lots of websites popping up at the moment offering carbon selling. There's been a few private deals around the world. I'm not aware of any in the UK yet. If someone comes and offers you some money for some carbon and you want to take it, absolutely fine, but don't go and sign up for something for too long, because it's like your phone contracts, that others will come along. And the whole idea of Agri-Capture is doing it from a farmer base, so it's a bottom-up approach rather than top-down. There's no point having city finance organisations or consultants and everyone else taking the money and the farmer being left with not much of it. And that's where Leaf comes in as a trusted organisation to sort of try and make sure we can police it, so that we do get the lion's share of the money into the farmer's pocket and not into the square mile or international conglomerate pockets.
Great, thanks, Duncan. And I think it really feels like this, as a market and as an area, sort of poised, and you don't quite know where it's going to shoot off. And there's some some early players, and then there's lots of wanting to wait until we know exactly what we're doing before we do. And I think recognise some slight caution that you're suggesting there, Duncan, in terms of selling it. But I think what we've heard today is that we don't need to wait in terms of measuring it, monitoring it, reducing it, and in essence getting as a farm your own house in order, so then you're in a really strong position to move quickly when those opportunities do come. Becky, did you want to add something onto the end of that?
I did, if that's okay. It is a bit of a plug really for Agri-Capture. So obviously, it's this 3-year project, and hopefully by the end of those 3 years, we will have that VERA approved methodology to deliver those verified carbon units. But the 3 years of that, we see it as a journey and a bit of a process that everybody is welcome to join. So part of the project is developing this European-wide regenerative agriculture network. And that's farmers, it's businesses, it's policy, it's any stakeholders interested in this. And through that, we're hoping, to deliver training modules and workshops and sort of demonstrations and all that kind of stuff to that. This is the side where we're promoting regenerative practices, promoting carbon friendly practices. And it's about getting as many people on board and implementing these practices for their farm. It's not just UK based. We're looking at Europe. We've got Crete, Greece, Cyprus, Poland, looking at what works for them, and then getting them to that position, like you said, Alice, the best position possible, the most optimal position at the end of those 3 years, to then be able to move on to that process of becoming net zero themselves as a business, and then potentially offering those surplus carbon credits out. So it's a bit of a plug for Agri-Capture. Come join the network and come see kind of what we're doing.
Brilliant, thanks, Becky. And in a moment, I'm going to put up a slide with contact details for myself, Becky, and Lucy Bates, who are the sort of key contacts for Resilient and Ready and Agri-Capture. So please do get in touch on that. So I think that really concludes our discussions today, and I really hope you've enjoyed them, you found them interesting, and if anything, hopefully a bit inspired to maybe, if you're looking at your farm business or you're working with other farm businesses, to encourage, maybe just the next step or the first step or the last step, or whatever. We've heard from different types of businesses at different stages in the journey with different focuses. So hopefully some of that has inspired you to look at what next for your own business. And whether that be from looking at what you want to change in your environment, what you want to change in your business, or whether you want to change what people think. And I think we've heard some really fantastic examples of those from across the UK today and across different businesses. I'd like to say a really, really big thank you to our speakers from this morning. Had fantastic talks from Becky, Duncan, Nick, Andy and Claire. And also for being willing to answer a wide range of different questions on different aspects on this very, very topical area. But I think we're all talking about it, but we don't quite know where it's going to go next. So a big thank you for offering your answers and also your thoughts on what might happen. And also a big thank you to you all. Fantastic to have a big audience, and also to be playing such an active part in the discussion. So sorry we haven't been able to come to all the questions, but we'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as we can, and we'll get back to one of you with as the winner of the best question, and put you in touch with Andy Guy for that. I also just wanted to mention a bit about partnerships. Becky mentioned about Agri-Capture, and just to reiterate that point about Resilient and Ready, if you've liked what you've seen this morning and you want to find out more, or you want to get involved, or any of that, then please do just get in contact with us. Even if you don't quite know what you want, just give us an email, because we love it, and we'll maybe take a discussion forward on that front. So I'm going to just share a slide with a few more details of future events that we've got going on, just to signpost you to those, or not, maybe. Yeah, so those are the email addresses for Agri-Capture, for Becky, for Resilient and Ready for me, and anything else on the leaf technical side of things for Lucy. And to encourage you to look out for the fortnightly leaf surgeries. We've got another biodiversity event on the 22nd of April, and you'll get details of that very shortly, as well as seeing various other things going on. And also just a final plug, if you want basis points from today, there's 2 basis points available, so please just pop that in the chat before you leave. And I think that is everything. So just to say a very big thank you again to all the speakers and you all for coming, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your Monday. Bye everyone.